Thank you for joining us and looking forward to this about the culture of DevOps, which is the centerpiece of DevOps. Over to you, Helen.
Thank you, Daniel. So we like to start here often with this quote from Peter Drucker that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And what Peter's really saying here is you can decide as much as you like what you think you want your organisation to do, but if the culture doesn't support what you're trying to do, it just won't happen. Well, at least that's my interpretation of this. I mean, Daniel, do you see it any differently?
No, I think lots of people have plans and strategies, but the culture of the organization can eat those, especially when you start seeing things like, management leave every 2 to 3 years. So then the culture starts to change to adopt and adapt that. So, culture does eat strategy. And it was a very apt comment by him.
We spend a lot of our time talking about culture. In fact, we did a similar webcast just a few weeks ago about how to make cultural improvements in IT. And this is one of the matrices that we use when we're helping customers and organisations perform a transformation. We do this in various ways, but mainly through an assessment and then a transformation programme. And these matrices that we use help us to identify or map an organisation's current state and then help them understand what a future state might look like. And then we can start putting the tools in place to make that journey. So this particular matrix is based on a very common acronym that is used to describe the component parts of DevOps. So CAMS was originally coined by John Willis, and then Jez Humble added in the L for lean. So the CAMS is the culture, automation, lean, measurement, and sharing. And clearly today we're spending these kind of 30 minutes or so talking about the cultural aspect. So at the bottom, the level 1 area, we've got that the technology strategy is not led by business values and customer needs. And there's a lack of KPIs. Now, KPIs, I know, Daniel, are a favourite thing of yours. So typically, kind of, how would you describe what the culture feels like when somebody's at level 1?
For me, the culture is, especially from an IT perspective, we're doing things, but we can't link it back to what the business does. We can't link it back to what the business wants. And because of that, we've got no indicators of performance as to whether what we're doing actually matters to anybody. So it's kind of like the operation was a success, but the patient still died.
So not really knowing why you're doing what you're doing.
Yes, not really knowing why you're doing what you're doing, or understanding what you are doing is actually, mattering to anybody. So you have a very dysfunctional group of individuals and dysfunctional and dissatisfied customers and users, which I think is what we see a lot when we go into organizations or, the first couple of levels.
And it starts with kind of almost like a lack of self-awareness, because we're moving into having this appetite to change. So we're seeing these change agents waking up at level 2. And at level 2, if there was 100 people in the organization, how many people out of those 100 at level 2 would be feeling those things, do you think?
Ooh.
Because it's not everybody at that point.
No, I think this is where you really do have just the few change agents. So 10%, what do you think?
Yeah, I would say around
that high?
A handful. But then the next stage up, level 3, that really starts to change because they've got the plan and they've got the support. So the change agents have spoken to whoever has the authority, if it's that kind of hierarchical organisation where they haven't empowered everybody to make change, that they've got those levels set. And then at level 4, the customer is coming right up front, and we've got these metrics that matter. And explain to us what the difference between a KPI and a metric that matters is.
Well, for me, a KPI is, something that will help you drive a decision, something that will help you at whatever level in the organization you're going to actively manage, and you're going to use that to help drive where you want to go and where do you want to be. For that to occur, the metric needs to matter. It needs to matter in terms of quality, in terms of cost, in terms of people performance and satisfaction, but most importantly in terms of what the customer wants. So lots of people have lots of KPIs that they can use to make things. Many of them don't matter to anybody.
And
I think, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, typically, how many metrics that matter should an organisation have? Is it 5, 15, 50?
I like to have 3 to 5 at the top level, 3 to 5 at the middle level, and 3 to 5 at the bottom level, and or another layer if you want with suppliers. So we really are talking about a very small tree, a very small handful of metrics that matter, that you could have branches off of for a few more. And I do say few because you only want a few. You want a nice tree, not a forest of KPIs.
And then we've got Nirvana, and we'll cover Nirvana a bit more as we go through our chat today. So Daniel and I spend quite a lot of time chewing the cud and chewing the fat and talking about stuff and looking at what other people think about things. And we did some quick searches on cultural change curves. And we've just got a few here. Here's the first example. So here we've got time on the x-axis and performance on the y-axis. And we can see everyone's kind of starting with these high expectations, then they're dropping down into a trough of despair, and then they pop up better at the other end. So a typical program has quite a deep dip, and an effective program has a shallower dip and ends higher. Interestingly, it starts lower as well, doesn't it, Daniel?
Yeah, this is when we go into organizations and we start looking at the various change programs. The change engine typically starts off with one of these types of slides. The very first thing that the change engine says is we're going to improve our culture, and we start showing the word despair to them. And that really the roller coaster is kind of narrow and it doesn't really make sense to people. And I think that there needs to, some of these others more accurately show change and the cycle associated with it, and gives people a way to, like this one, gives people a way to go, okay, over time, over place, the comfort and satisfaction, these are the various cycles, and they are going to go up and down. It's not just going to be one big dip. It's going to be a cycle of dips.
Yeah, and I do like this one because it's got this kind of double dip where they start and everything's new and exciting and different, and they get a bit frustrated, and then they've kind of got a superficial level of adjustment, if you like the first kind of layer's been peeled off, and then they kind of dip again and a bit deeper, where they have more understanding and they're looking kind of deeper into these issues. On the y-axis here, we've got the level of comfort and satisfaction. On the one before, we had performance. I quite like on this one as well, though I'm not sure I quite entirely like the words, but the three kind of levels, they've got like the native culture, the foreign culture, the native culture. And when we look later on, it's like we'll talk about how to make these changes basically normalised. So they're just part of what you're doing. They become the way things are.
I think what I also like about I'm sorry.
No, Karen.
I think what I also like about the other one is that because it shows various cycles, it fits into the DevOps way of thinking, of doing things in a cyclical manner and improving over time.
So having many iterations
That's
and applying feedback loops. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then this one is kind of telling us the same. And this one's got morale on the y-axis. So we've had performance, kind of sense of comfort, and morale on the y-axis. But, this idea that it starts great, everyone's excited, and then it's really difficult, and then you come out the other side. And I guess the key thing is to keep that momentum and to get you back out of the chasm and up into the mountains, if you like.
And I think that's where on the calm slide that we had, which you've iterated at the different levels, having the right metrics allows people to make this curve not very deep, because people know what they need to do along that experiment decision cycle to go better.
And this is your favourite one with all the little emojis on it.
It just looks fun.
It does look fun. The red one really scares me.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with all the colors and words and everything, but if you're going to do this, make up one for yourself and make it look fun.
I think the other thing I really like about this is like when we talk about what culture is almost like the articulation of a mass behaviour. So you've got a number of humans that are all working together, hopefully quite collaboratively, and there are certain behaviours that make that kind of culture distinct or describable. But all of those individuals are going to go through a different journey. So you've got the change agents who are kind of leading the charge that are trying to buoy everyone up. And then you've got some people that are going to be really fearful, some people who are just like, I don't understand what's going on. I mean, I was reading that story earlier on. I can't remember the company's name, began with Zoo, but the Hollowcracy story, and the CEO kind of went, right, this is where we're going. You can come along for the journey, or here's a severance package. And 260 of them, which was 10 or 20% of the workforce, took the severance package. But the interview was with someone that had stayed, and she actually really enjoyed the change and the kind of change they went through. We'll talk about a bit later. But I think when we're trying to make change, we need to understand that we are a pack of individuals as well as a whole ecosystem.
And I think we need to be able to map the various change levels, which is an important point that you just brought out, was that management's going to have a change curve, middle management's going to have a change curve, and the rest of the organization is going to have a change curve. And if you think that everyone's going to go on the same curve, you're going to be sadly mistaken.
So this is Simon Sinek, and we talk about him and his philosophies a lot in all of our training and all the work we do, because starting anything, you have to fundamentally understand why you're doing it. So what is the organisational why? So this is kind of the starting point for cultural change. And we touched on this as the kind of level 5 nirvana on our calms matrix in our culture column. How does an organisation understand its why, Daniel, and what happens if different people think it's a different thing?
If you listen to Simon, most people never ask the question why. They never ask the question, why are we doing this? They never ask the question, why do we have culture, and why does our culture look like this? They don't ask questions that start with the word why. And it really is just that simple, just phrasing your question with the word why. And that to us is paramount. And I know that when we've gone into customers and we've asked the question starting with the word why instead of what or how, the answers and responses and attitudes that change are dramatic, even in just a 20 or 30-minute interview. So I think starting with that question, with the why question, is mind-boggling and revealing, and can lead you through the maze of what it is that you're trying to alter in your organization.
And then we get to the what. So we've understood why we're doing what we're doing. Now we're trying to establish what we've got and what we want to change. Is that right?
Well, that's my view. I think you need to know what you have now and what you want to become. And that has to then be, what does good look like? And that has to match back to your why, which a lot of people don't do. They don't go, okay, we'd like to become this. Does that match to the why we're doing this? They just go, yep, that looks good, we'll do that. And off they go. And I think that they're not looking at good, they're not looking at problems, and that they're trying to solve. And again, that's an issue.
And you and I have this conversation because I'd kind of like to change this to what does great look like. And I think if we try and articulate, as the title of the webcast suggested, what a DevOps culture looks like, we're talking about a frictionless environment where innovation is led by customer feedback. Things are happening really fast, but at a really high quality and with very little pain, with very little fear. People feel really empowered. They feel that their ideas are really acted upon, and those are kind of the typical kind of cultural attributes that organisations we work with are trying to head for. I think. Are there any other kind of words? Transparency is another one. I think we say a lot. Any other attributes of a DevOps culture that people are trying to create or trying to move towards?
No, I think you've hit them all. Going back to the comms matrix, if I had to change that from instead of 5 levels, I would just go bad, good, great. So if you can identify at least what good looks like, you can start to measure yourself as you improve towards nirvana or great. But at least you definitely know what bad looks like. And
So
those are all important things.
So bad looks like a place where people feel that they have no autonomy to do anything, where they feel messengers are blamed or shot for bringing bad news. Work is very slow to happen. There's lots of friction, lots of handoffs, lots of cab meetings, whatever it is. There's loads of war rooms and post-mortems and generally kind of a lot of stress going on.
Yes. And we don't have the right tools, and they want us to work in 2-week cycles, but we get our budget in 15-month cycles, and we never had the right resources, and the list can go on and on.
Yeah. So this is a slide from my DevOps patterns presentation that I do quite a lot, and it kind of starts with a traditional IT enterprise organizational structure with the CIO, with his dev team and his ops team, and then all the silos. And then we walk through how the organization evolves in a DevOps manner, and we end up here. So what's different about here, Daniel?
Well, I love this slide. I remember the first time you showed me this, and I was just flabbergasted because what you have here is the CIO, and you could probably put, and the board, his customers, his peers, his stakeholders, all looking about how do they innovate products and services for the customer. So now it's no longer a technology management system, it's a customer innovation system. And below, you've got all these green people that are working on products. They're not working on projects. They're working on products and services that are satisfying the business. And they've got dashboards. They've got automation. They've got alignment or integration into the way the work is doing. And everyone's on board with that top down. So I love this slide. This is an amazing slide. This is nirvana.
So this is Dan Pink. So Dan Pink does a great talk on TED. We often link to it actually, so we'll try and remember to send a link in the follow-up email from this webcast. But when we're trying to change culture, and Daniel's already kind of touched on it, it's like trying to set these metrics that matter, trying to set goals. When we have very strict goals in the type of work that we do in IT, which is very complex, knowledge-driven work, putting rewards in that are very extrinsic can often be counterintuitive to the work that's trying to be done. So Dan Pink's argument is that actually what we need to do is create a culture where people and individuals in it feel that they have these 3 things: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So they've got the ability to do the things that they need to do without having to seek authority or approval for it all the time. They have enormous pride in the work that they do because they recognise that they have been able to learn and experiment and become true masters of the particular chosen fields that they have, and that they have real meaning in the work that they do. There's a real purpose. They understand that organisational why. So when we're trying to get to the nirvana here, all of these people should feel those 3 things. And those 3 things then result in very happy people and then a very high performing organisation. So how do we do this? How do we get to a point where people do feel that they're allowed to have ideas, in fact encouraged to have ideas, and that their ideas are acted upon, and actually they have the authority to act upon the ideas that they have themselves? How do they feel that they're not just a cog in a machine that's being told what to do, but actually there's some real purpose and meaning for what they do? So Daniel and I often used to use a Western organisational kind of chart. We've tending to replace it with this one at the moment, which is from the Frederick Laloux book, Reinventing Organizations. And it's based on holacracy. If you haven't come across that before, we're going to look at it in a bit more detail in a moment. But it has some interesting ideas about articulating the difference between what most of us are doing today, which is the orange levels. So this is kind of the classic kind of corporate structure. So, it's all about competition, getting profit and growth, management by objectives, having this kind of command and control hierarchy. So we think of it as a machine. So I kind of talked about this kind of feeling that you're just like a cog in a machine, where we're really trying to get to. And these are very DevOpsy words: self-organizing and self-managed teams, taking away the management role of telling people what to do, but making those managers coaches, which I know, Daniel, is something you're really passionate about, is the coach as manager.
I think managers are coaches. Managers are not there to solve problems. That's why they employed somebody. Managers are there to help people solve problems and to remove obstacles and to enable goals. And if they can do that in a way that lets people feel accountable for what they're doing, feel that they're contributing, back to what Dan Pink was saying, feel that they have purpose, then you have an organization that is better, faster, safer in what they're doing. And that has to be nirvana.
And one of my favourite stories here is Waterstones. His books are a thing very close to my heart anyway. But Waterstones, and the whole book industry has been severely disrupted, and because the technology is so good, severely disrupted by technology. And Waterstones were having a lot of trouble, and someone came in and bought them up, a Japanese businessman, and brought in Daunt from Daunt Books, which was a big surprise to everyone because he was seen as a little bit of a kind of hippie indie bookseller rather than a big corporate guy. But that's what the Japanese businessman really understood, was the value of books and the value of reading, the value of immersing yourself in a story or gaining more knowledge. But what Daunt did that really turned Waterstone's fortunes around was he ripped out the command and control structure of having head office telling all the stores what to put in their stores and how to sell it. And he let every store itself become a self-organizing team that decided, made decisions on behalf or with their customers. So they listened, they were sensors to their local customers, and they stocked books according to what their customers wanted to read. And they hired people that were really passionate about reading, that would spend time advising customers on books that they'd enjoyed and books that were similar to their customers' tastes. So a really powerful way of just turning our perceptions of how corporate culture should be set up, I think, on its head. I think really giving a lot of power back to the people who are doing the work that are actually in front of the customers. So these few slides we're not going to go into in too much detail in the interest of time, but you can obviously, they'll be in the slide pack if you want to have a closer look yourself. But these are, this again from the same book, so the teal practices, the kind of Hollowcratic practices. And I just wanted to pick out a few, which when you talk about DevOps and DevOps cultures, they're very, very similar. So again, like these self-organizing teams, having coaches but not managers, radically simplifying project management and actually having no project managers, which is what Daniel was referring to earlier. And we talk to people about this a lot. We haven't mentioned it today, but often when we're talking about what DevOps is, we talk about it as the convergence of three maturing practices, being Agile, Lean, and ITSM. And when we talk to people about becoming more agile and using agile practices, we talk about them becoming product focused, like we saw in the DevOps Nirvana slide. Now, Daniel, I've seen many instances on customer site with you where project managers have caught their breath at this point because we're saying no project managers. So where do all the project managers go in this new product centric world?
And I believe that they, because of their experience with the end users and senior stakeholders, that they now should help manage and become product owners or service owners, agile service owners. agile process owners. They should change their way of thinking back out toward the customer instead of thinking about, okay, we have this project and we've got this timeline. And that radically changes the collaboration and communication and cooperation amongst the entire organization for their use of technology, which is exactly what DevOps is about.
And we'll see more
It just gets
about
people
that.
talking differently. Yeah.
We'll see more about that on the next slide as well. And then the other one I really wanted to pull out on here was the minimum or no plans and budgets and organic prioritization. So many organizations we're working with at the moment are moving away from traditional annual budgeting cycles, as Daniel alluded to earlier. So you can set a budget now and you could be spending it 15 months later, and we know stuff changes. This is the whole principle of agile, is that we know that everything changes, so we have to do it in smaller cycles. So why aren't we doing that with our budgets? I wrote a blog on this quite recently, all the continuouses, and one of our customers, Lindsay Smith, who's the CTO of Tailrock, shared it and made a comment that it terrifies him, this idea. It's like, it's either, you can see that being a way to go bust, but I think we see there is a transitional step where you can assign a big lump of budget but pull it down incrementally, and that kind of gets you used to doing it. And this is, of course, the DevOps way, is to experiment and learn and try things at a small level, and then as you've proven that it works, showcase it, celebrate it, and try it again. I didn't see your response to Lindsay, actually, but Daniel, is your response to people that are very scared of this idea of continuous funding similar to mine, or would you have more to add?
It's spot on with yours. I think if you're asking people to do minimum viable products or minimum viable projects, whatever term you'd like to use, then you need to give them a minimum viable budget and minimum viable resources to do it with. And all of that needs to go hand in hand if you want to be successful. So I agree with you. I need to go back and answer Lindsay, I guess.
So you might be able to hear my cat, who's just coming from the garden. I'm at my home office today. This slide, though, the one I really wanted to pull out, was about no job titles and fluid and granular roles. And that's very DevOpsy, and this is kind of what Daniel was talking about earlier, when I asked him about this frequent moment that we have where we talk to people about becoming more agile and moving away from being project-centric into product-centric environments, and the look of panic on typical kind of PMO and project managers, and then this realization that actually they still have plenty of work to do. It's just in a different way and a different approach. Daniel, what do you think about no job title?
Well, it's going to make a lot of people unhappy on LinkedIn.
I have seen, though, I don't know whether you've noticed this as well, there is a trend for not having a job title, but actually just having a description of kind of 5 or 6 key skills.
I hope that over time people will not worry that much about the job title and start thinking about the job outcome and the skills are going to lead to that outcome. And I believe that what Hollowcracy is trying to say is, you have an opportunity, you need to have the right type of knowledge. Teams work better than individuals. People need to be coached in how they do work. So let's all work together to get the best outcome for the organization. And this cycle of change, it takes time. And people that tried to slam this in are going to get conflicts.
Yeah, definitely. And this one, let's not spend too much time on this because we are running out of time that we've set aside for this webcast. But for me, this boils down to visualization. So having Kanban boards, having metrics on display around the office, which I've seen you talk about this so often with organisations, and with, we spend lots of time walking around rooms that people have set up, or setting up Kanban boards with people, or finding these metrics that matter, and things. Why is it so important to have it available in real time to all?
It's the bottom line. It's storytelling. How many times have you and I walked in front of a board and asked them to talk to us about it, and they can't, well, this has to be done and this has to be done. Yeah, but why? Why are you doing this? Who are you doing it for? What is the value of doing this? And you can't tell the story. All these boards are storyboards. You can't visualize the outcome. If you can't visualize the outcome, how do you know if you're on track or not? How do you know if what you're doing is correct? So it's getting out of that discipline of just doing the ceremony and actually starting to turn it into storytelling.
And I can't remember where we were now, and it was the first time I'd ever seen it, but you'd seen it before. In fact, I think you talked about your friend Alan Nance. I'm very familiar with this. Maybe he implemented it several places he's been. But the lamps, that switch on when something happens.
Yeah, that was the CIO of a bank in Poland, and he had 10 lamps outside of his office for the 10 key performance indicators or metrics that mattered for his entire organization, up and down to the business. And because he was doing active monitoring against these, because these KPIs were so important to him that they needed to be always being monitored, he could look at the lamps and he could tell whether or not they were on target or not, just to see whether or not they were red or green. There were no amber in the lamps.
Yeah, it's really powerful, isn't it? Really simple, but really powerful. And just quickly, again, these slides will be available for you to look at later. But the idea here that I really like is the idea that everyone is a sensor. So that everyone is listening to the customer, which is such a DevOps thing. Everybody becomes part of the feedback loop, which again is such a DevOps principle. It's, the second way is amplifying these feedback loops, and allowing them to have the autonomy and authority to respond accordingly to what they hear. So there is no silver bullet for making cultural change. There is no simple package of work that we could offer to you that would make this happen. It is a journey, but there is a definite pattern to the journey, or there are definite steps that you can take. So the first line is knowing where you are, so baselining your current state, and then understanding this why, the Simon Sinek, really just asking yourself, why are we doing what we do? Then you can have a deeper understanding by looking at your value streams. And Danny, explain what a value stream is.
A value stream is the customer's wish turned into realization. So from idea to realization, what is that stream that allows that to happen? What is it that allows you to provide value back to a customer, internally or externally? How can you describe that so that you can create that flow, one of the DevOps ways, get the right feedback, and do it in a way that you can improve over time to make that customer experience better and better, and also the employees involved or suppliers.
And then we need to articulate the desired future state, which is where these maturity matrices can become so powerful, because we can place your position, so your baseline state on it, and then figure out where you can go next, and then identify the things that you need to change to start to build this roadmap or plan. I love the fact that we've just got step 6 as change, because kind of that's the hardest bit. It's like, what are you actually going to do? How are you going to release people's time to spend more time experimenting and learning? How are you going to cancel all those fixed meetings? How are you going to rearrange people around product? There's all of these actual activities that need to happen in the waking hours that we're at work. So that kind of getting up every day and doing the best that you can do, and making those incremental changes on a minute by minute, day by day basis that eventually get us to that point where, if you remember from the cultural change curve earlier, where we started with kind of a native culture and then went through a foreign culture and then it became native again. So making it normal, normalizing these new behaviours and this new cultural state. So this is what we're doing all day, every day with people. These are some of the component packages that we have that help people on this journey. They can all stand alone. They can all be used in combination with each other as well. So the lift off workshop is one day, typically around 12 people in the room. We run through 9 exercises that take us from defining DevOps through baselining metrics, setting goals, looking at the way that people are motivated, playing with things like Kanban and looking at flow and the theory of constraints, mapping out tool chains. So it's a pretty intense day, but it's intended to get a group of people kind of all on the same page and all quite fired up about what DevOps can do. Our discovery assessments are more in depth. They typically take the format of us having some kickoff meetings and then doing a series of interviews with individuals across the whole organisation and often into the business as well. And then we give you this impartial third-party view of your current state, and then we make we help you build the roadmap for your best practice-based improvements based on our observations over the past many years, helping other people make this sort of change. We just talked about value streams, so this is a really great way to do 2 things at once: get a really deep understanding of your current state and at the same time map out your future state with very specific activities about how to get there. It's very important that these happen at a very high level. These are a high level kind of 60,000 foot view. It requires management with authority in the room, that the people that can actually make the change to get involved. We also do, it's not described on this slide, but we also do process mapping. Daniel, would you like to say anything more about the difference between VSM and process mapping?
Well, value stream mapping is where the right people in the room get together to decide the why. Process mapping is where the right people in the room get together to decide the how, to match to the why. And when you and I did a value stream mapping exercise a couple of weeks ago with £1 million worth of management in the room, it was absolutely amazing, the fact that they never talked to each other on a regular basis. They only knew their own little bit of the value stream. They'd never seen it end to end. And for a very insignificant way of work, which is what a value stream is, they didn't understand and didn't even think about all the different touch points and stuff that had been put into it, and which clearly explained to them when they visualized it. So again, this is a visualization exercise of why their outcome wasn't the outcome that they wanted. So when you led them through that future state, all the things on the previous slide, and you helped them document that, they got fired up, and they're still doing that now.
We also are a registered education provider. In fact, I'm on the board as well of the DevOps Institute. So we have a couple of courses, the DevOps Foundation course and the Certified Agile Service Manager course. And we're shortly going to be announcing the Agile Process Owner course as well. And there'll be also some very exciting continuous delivery course coming out shortly, and a DevOps Practitioner course coming out of the DOI. So what tends to happen, or often happens with these, is that we run them public schedule, but we also run them on site. So we often see 1 or 2 change agents from an organisation on a public schedule, and then we go and spread the word. So get into our DevOps Nirvana slide of turning everyone green by repeating the training with the larger groups of people on site. And then finally, we do a lot of coaching. Some organisations that offer DevOps services, the kind of thing that they actually offer is to maybe put 6 contractors on site for 6 months to build a CD pipeline or something. And that's really not the approach at all that we take at Range 4. We front end everything that we do with cultural and organisational change. For starters, we never dive into the automation or the technology without making sure that the first 2 steps of getting the organisation straight and getting the interaction straight haven't happened. And we don't really want to just put people in and take people out, because that hasn't helped us get to the DevOps Nirvana. What we're trying to do is help you make the change yourselves and help that change be lasting and all-encompassing. So that is us for today. We've just gone slightly over, so sorry about that. We do have a question from Duncan, so it's a good one for you, I think, Daniel. Why don't organisations ask themselves why questions?
We asked that question the last time we did a value stream map, and the answer back was because it's easier for someone outside the organization to say, show us your dirty laundry, than it is for us internally to say, show us your dirty laundry. Outside, someone asking it takes all the politics out. And I think that's why people don't have the courage to ask themselves the why question internally. What do you think?
I think you've brought us really nicely kind of full circle back to what a DevOps culture looks like. And the DevOps culture has transparency, and people aren't fearful of being the messenger and pointing out things are wrong because they're understood and trusted to have the right motivations behind them in terms of being part of the team and collaborating to improve things. So yeah, I think you're spot on that the organisations that aren't asking themselves that have probably got a culture of some sort of fearfulness of being the person that sticks your head up over the parapet and asks the difficult questions or makes critical statements which people may not want to hear.
Yep.
So unless there's any more questions from anybody, if you've got any questions now, pop them in the box or in the chat. Can't see anything coming through, so I think we will leave that one here today and thank everybody very much for your time and hope you enjoy the rest of your days.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.